I'm saying this in a humbly mode, but like I was a 60 to 70% close rate, which is why I can work 3 days a week.
Geez, 60 to 70% close rate, guys. For those of you guys who don't know the industry, like 25, 30, 35% at best is kind of average, right?
Yeah.
Across the board. That is insanity right there.
Yeah.
All right, everybody, welcome to another episode of the Closers Network podcast. Guys, this podcast is for any individual that's looking to make between $10,000 and $30,000 per month as a high-ticket remote closer, even with no experience. But guys, today I'm excited because we have a special guest in the studio today. I'm going to introduce our guest. First of all, I want to say our guest is a mom. She's owned a gym for almost 9 years before she was forced to shut it down. She's now, in her own words, working way less than when she owned a gym. She shared with us that she's making 5 times more money than when she was actually running her gym. She's actually now working just 3 days a week. She believes how you do one thing is how you do everything. She's been hanging out with us over here for the last couple days for our first in-person Closers Network event. And I'm really excited, guys, to officially, and also I should add, she's also a part of our sales agency, Won't Call Closers, a top closer. And I'm really excited, guys, to welcome Courtney. Courtney, welcome to the studio.
Hi, Mike. Nice to meet you.
How you doing?
Good. How are you?
Good. How was the event?
It was really good. It's good to kind of get a bunch of people together in one setting to really pick each other's brains. Because I think when you're in remote closing, right, it's an island. You're by yourself. Mm-hmm. So the more you can interact with people and kind of learn, how does this work for this person? How does this work for that person? Like, that's just how you become better. You know, like it's the great saying, like you are the sum of the 5 people that you hang out and talk with the most. So if you want to be great, you have to put yourself around great people. And that's literally what I took away from yesterday was just these little nuggets. Like aha moments, I guess you could call them.
Love it. Love it. That's awesome. Well, hey, I want to know, because being forced to shut down a gym is a pretty intense thing. That's your livelihood. That's everything you had. I would imagine. I want to kind of let you explain and get into the story, but how did that end up happening? How did you end up here? What was that transition like?
Yeah. So I've been in fitness for 20 years. When I grew up in San Diego and moved to Chicago, my husband's from a little tiny town outside of there, just mid-20s. I was like, I'm over San Diego. So where does that sound? And then when we moved there, I opened a gym and it was just supposed to be, the small, tiny thing. And it just took off. My husband came and joined me. It was like, we ran it and we were the number 1 biggest kettlebell gym in Chicago, in downtown Chicago.
Wow. That's awesome.
We got heavily involved with Spartan Race. We would travel. We would coach workshops for them. We were like really connected and the gym was growing. We had literally just expanded from 1,000 square feet to 4,000 square feet.
Whoa, big jump.
2 months before COVID hit. And then Chicago completely shut down massively. And we did like online, classes for a few months and just, when you're charging a premium dollar, it's like, this doesn't really add up. And then when the city allowed, in our industry, we call them big box gyms open and none of us small boutiques where we could, tailor everything. I was like, this isn't worth it anymore, and it was a very hard decision to close down something like that because when you spend 14, 16, 18-hour days, like just feeding this and the members and all of that, it's like a community, right? It's a family.
It's like also another baby almost, right?
100%. And it's funny that you say that is that I had my son a few years into us owning it. And so he was like crawling around and like doing all these things. But, I even had a conversation with the clients once, like I spend more time here than I do at home with my own child.
Wow.
And that was like kind of a reality check even for me. My son wasn't even a year old and I'm like, man, like this isn't really what how I envisioned this, and this was like lockdown time. So when they decided to not allow us to open up and everybody else, I was like, we can't keep doing this. So decided to close it down. And 2 months later, we moved to Washington, which is where my family is at. When my parents retired from the military, that's where they moved to. So it was kind of this transition of, downtown crazy living to literally I live in the middle of nowhere now, the middle of the trees, right on the water. It's beautiful and so calm and peaceful. So yeah, it's just definitely a huge switch. And then, 1CC was brought to me and this account that I'm working on, and it literally is filled that void because I'm working on a fitness account.
Yeah.
So it filled a void in a couple of different areas, right? Like when you go from being somebody who helps people change their lives and doing it for as long as I did, to it completely being gone. I guess the best way to explain it to somebody who just works in a job and not like a career that they're actually passionate about is like, it's like a drug that's taken away. And you don't know like how to fulfill that void. And then when Ian, who I know from the fitness industry, like came to me and was like, yo, I have this like awesome like sales opportunity. I was like, sales, I don't want to do sales. And he's like, no. It's not like you're sleazy, you're calling people all the time type of situation. And then started on the account, and it filled that void, right? It filled that void of being able to help people make the decisions to change their lives. And then just, in general, like 1CC's changed my life. I mean, closed the gym down, filed bankruptcy, like literally lost everything, moved in with my parents at like, gosh, how old was I? 35, 36.
By the way, Courtney looks like she's about like early 20s, mid 20s, just for everyone.
And it's just like, it was a humbling moment, I think, is kind of when you're at your top and then all of a sudden you're like, down at the bottom, like you're 18 again. You're like, oh my gosh, I'm moving back home with my husband and my kid. Like, this is embarrassing. But 1CC like gave us this opportunity to pick our lives back up. And sorry, it makes me emotional.
Yeah. I have goosebumps on. You guys can see that.
But like in the 2 years that I've been working, doing this remote closing, it's giving me the opportunity to homeschool my son, be home to do all the things that I didn't get to experience having military parents. I didn't get to do, vacations when we want to. And hey, yes, let's go do that because I don't have to work. Like I can make my own schedule, We bought a house. Like I think that was the biggest pivotal turning point for us, like literally filing bankruptcy and losing everything to being able to buy like a $500,000 home,
Holy smokes.
No way. And only doing 3 days a week of working. Like
was that like about a year? How long ago after?
It was exactly a year after I started working for 1CC. Like it was totally a God thing, right? Because as a believer, like that's been a big part of this last like 4 years since closing down the gym, almost 5 years now. But was like I had prayed like, hey God, like provide me with something where I can still help people in fitness, but not have to fulfill it. Cause that was just mentally exhausting doing it for so many years. Yeah. And legit, Mike, like 2 months later, I get a call from Ian.
Crazy.
And it's just turned into, what it is. I mean, it's provided a lot for my family and a lot of freedom. I can travel and I can still work. And I think one of the biggest things was, as a parent, you want to be able to provide what you didn't have as a child. And that's what this has been able to do.
Damn, that is an incredible journey, guys. There's so much to unpack there, and I'm excited to unpack that. First of all, for those of you guys who don't know who Ian is, guys, so Ian is one of he's the sales director and team lead of one of our accounts that we have, the V-Shred account. And so I'd love to actually know, so you mentioned Ian reached out to you, right? What role did networking and building relationships play in that transition? Like, how did you even meet Ian? Like, how did that all come together, right?
So, and again, a crazy, like, God kind of moment here, right? Like, I'm going to talk about that a lot because that's, like, a lot of who I am and, like, how I think, right? Is that Ian knew Bedros. Rich knew Bedros. And so it was kind of this full circle of, like, holy crap, like, I've never met Rich before, but we know all of like the same kind of people because of like him working for him. You know what I'm saying? And then, so it's just kind of this full circle thing. And Ian was one of our breakout coaches when I owned my gym because he used to work for Bedros, like doing coaching. And so I just stayed in contact with Ian over the years. I've known Ian since I was in my early 20s when I opened my gym.
Wow.
And I think it was like 25. And so it's like one of these things like, making these connections and staying in contact with people, even if it's just like, hey, how are you doing? Like through social media, you never know how that's going to come back and benefit you in some way,
100%.
shape or form. And it goes back to like what I was saying, right? Like if you want to be successful or if you want to do something different in your life, you have to be able to surround yourself with those type of people, right? I don't believe in coincidences. I believe that there's a path for everything. And in order to be successful at that path, like you have to have opportunities placed in front of you. And so that's literally, how that happened. Just with moving to Washington, Ian's also in Washington. So we like totally connected on that and stuff. But when he approached me with it, I was like, this is insane that it's kind of falling into places like that. Cause it was probably a year after we had moved to Washington that I got that call from Ian.
Man, that's crazy. That's what a freaking story, man. So, and talk about like, there's something to be said about like the journey of like having these struggles and then overcoming them. Guys, in 1 year after filing bankruptcy, she bought a $500,000 house, like in a year. I would love to dive into, so I can't imagine like you got in and it was your first week or your first month and everything was flowing and it was rainbows and sunshine. Did you have any struggles? Was there any challenges you had to overcome? And if so, like what was that transition like coming from the background you did into more of now a high ticket sales position?
I honestly, like, this is going to be difficult coming from me, but like working on a fitness account, it was easy for me. I knew how to talk to people. I knew how to connect emotionally with people, because that's like what I lived and breathed and like why I was created. Like that was my purpose. And so it was very easy for me to transition into it. And because I sold high tickets for gym, like my gym was $300 to $500 a month. So I felt comfortable asking for that money.
Got it.
And obviously this is way higher dollar, but I don't have qualms with money, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't make me feel uncomfortable or anything like that. It's just money. So for me, I think it was a very, very easy, smooth transition because I had the framework of how a sales needs to be,
right? Because
I sold myself in my gym. I think the only challenging part is that you have a shorter amount of time to connect with somebody. I don't know this person by having interactions to be able to pull all of that in. So you have to be really good at body language.
Yep.
You have to be very good at expressing what you're feeling through a camera, which is very difficult to do, right?
Yeah.
You have to have empathy. And if you're not good at that, that's very hard to be able to, relay that across the camera.
That's one of the reasons we don't do the podcast over Zoom and we do it in person.
Yeah, it's right. It's totally different. Like interaction with people like face to face. And so I think that was a little bit of a challenge when you're so used to doing like person to person sales. But I think once you get into the groove of understanding, like, how can I emotionally connect with somebody in such a short amount of time? How do I make that person feel super comfortable? I think the only challenge per se that I had was kind of balancing everything in terms of figuring out, okay, here's what I want to make. How do I make that accomplishable in the small amount of time that I want to work? And that I think was more of the challenge. Like, how do I get really, 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 really good so I can only work, 3 days a week?
3 days a week, jeez.
I know.
And you've got some massive goals that you shared yesterday. I don't know if you want to share it now, but for working 3 days a week, she's got some massive goals, guys. And I don't have any doubt in my mind she's going to be able to accomplish them. When it comes to, one thing I want to get into, if it's okay. At 25, you shared that, your world kind of got rocked, right? And you had a totally different perspective. Who was Courtney before that incident? And would you mind sharing with our listeners, like what happened that really impacted and changed your life?
Yeah. So I grew up with military parents. I was definitely the rebellious kid. I've always beat to my own drum. I think from a very young age, didn't like authority. So I didn't like people telling me what to do. So that meant jobs and things like that. I always knew that I had to be my own boss, and that that's just my personality. And so my parents were in the military, and when they retired, they moved to Washington this summer before my senior year. I grew up in Southern California, San Diego. You're going to move me from San Diego to Washington State, right? And I love it now as an adult, but when I moved, this is 2002, Washington's 10 years behind everything. what San Diego was. And so that was a big shock for me. And I was like, no. So I turned 18 3 days into my senior year. I walked into the principal's office and was like, no, unenrolled myself from high school, moved back to San Diego.
You unenrolled yourself from high school?
Yeah, because I was 18.
How does that work?
Because you're 18, you're legally an adult.
Wow.
Yeah. So I came home and I told my parents and they're like, doesn't surprise me. And it at that time, it was like a really super hard decision to make because obviously you're a kid still at 18. As much as I took care of myself and had worked from the time I was 15 and all of these different things, it's like you're leaving home. So I moved and I was dating a guy from the time I was 16. So there was like that whole young love, you think you love somebody at 18, but that's a different story. So I moved to San Diego and tried doing homeschooling and working full time at 18 just wasn't it. So I got my GED. Went to college for medical assisting, started, working in the field and was like, this is not for me. And I just at that time was like lost, I guess is the best way to put it. So a lot of partying, a lot of drugs, a lot of drinking. I had the best 20s. I mean, I have no regret of it. I don't believe in regrets. I think that, these experiences, right? Like they shape you. They shape you 100%. Into who you're going to be as an adult. And I 100% don't think I would be who I am without those experiences.
Without a doubt. I believe the same thing.
Because it taught me a lot about myself. I had to take care of myself. I didn't have my parents to rely on. Mm-hmm. I broke up with that guy like several months after I moved back. So it was like, all right, what do I do? I'm 18 years old living in Southern California. Like I've got to figure something out. Right. Yeah. And so like I started training, at 18, like little clients here and there. It was just kind of a hobby. It wasn't like a full-time thing. And then, as I progressed into my mid 20s, like drinking and doing a lot of drugs was, I'd get up, I would do a line of Coke. I'd go to work. I'd come home on my lunch break, do another line of Coke, go back to work. Like I lived and breathed that life for so many years and not realizing like where that path was going to take me. Mm-hmm. And I 100% like am very grateful now as, at almost 40 that literally, and this is kind of a funny story, I had been working for a financial company in their like real estate and facilities department for a long time. And my boss was actually a recovering addict and he'd been clean for years and years and years. And so I always he was, kind of that dad figure without being a dad because he's only like 10 years older than me. But it was 2 days before my 25th birthday.
2 days before.
2 days. And I had said to him like, wow, Howard, like I'm about to turn 25. I've never been arrested. Don't have any kids. Everybody from high school had kids at that point. I think I'm doing pretty well, considering being on my own for so long. And he's like, no, man, like that. I'm so proud of you, blah, blah, blah. Well, guess what I decided to do that night? Went out and got a DUI.
Oh my goodness.
And what was even crazier about it is that
same day you're having that conversation.
Same day I had that
Holy
conversation.
Smokes.
Same day I got off work. I went down to the beach area where I lived. I was drinking and partying. And, I went home. This is what's so crazy about it. And again, I feel like things happen for a reason, right? Mm-hmm. I went home and the people that I were with, they were way, 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 way intoxicated. I just had a couple of drinks, but I get a call from one of them. And they're like, my keys are in your purse. I'm way too drunk to drive my car. Can you please come move my car for me? Because it was parked somewhere that I couldn't do extended parking. Mm-hmm. Sure. So I go down there and I pick them up and they're super, super out of it. So I pull out of the parking spot and as I'm pulling out, there's a cop behind me and I look over at the guys whose truck I was driving and I was like, I'm totally getting pulled over. And he's like, don't worry about it, blah, blah. So we turn around the corner and they pull me over.
Jeez.
You've got to be kidding me right now. But here's where the kicker comes in. So the cop comes up to the car, doesn't even ask me for my ID, asks the guy in the passenger seat for his ID.
What?
I'm like, what the hell's going on, Nick? And so Nick gives him his ID and he's just running his mouth. I'm like, shut up. What are you doing? Dude. So long story short, he ended up having a warrant for a citation for throwing a cigarette out the window.
No.
Yeah, stupid.
The cop knew him or something? Or seen him before?
I don't know. Well, so when we were walking to the car, Nick had thrown a beer bottle in the street. And we're in PB, for heaven's sakes. This is you don't do stupid stuff like that. So they pull Nick out of the car And this was like before pot was like legal, and he had pot on him. And so they go to arrest him, and then they come back around to me and they're like, I need you to turn the car off. Let me have your ID. I'm like, bro, I could have totally have gone home. Like, are you kidding me? So I blew 0.01 above the legal limit.
Oh, man.
And all I
said
could,
you had 2 drinks that night, right?
I had
like barely.
Yeah, so I had 2 drinks and like a shot. And this was like probably 2 hours after I had stopped drinking. You know what I'm saying? And so all I could think, and this is what's funny, is I didn't care that I was getting arrested. I didn't care that any of the consequences. I was like, my mother is going to kill me.
Jeez.
And this is like, almost 10 years after I left home.
Yeah, I was going to say, how does that work? If it's like you've been so far apart from your, independent on your own, like you still had fear like that?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I grew up with like, so to explain my mom, and I love her to death, and I think that I'm the woman I am strength-wise because of her. She was a single mom for years. But my mom is like G.I. Jane, like the movie. Like shaved head, like just was very militant. And I think when you grow up with a parent like that, you're constantly seeking like approval.
Yeah. That's how my dad is. I understand.
And it's hard, And so that was like, oh my God, my mom's gonna be so disappointed in me, blah, 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 blah. And so I get arrested, I do everything, right? Like I don't tell her about it.
Jeez.
So like 6-7 months later, after like I paid everything, I went through all the classes, like life's starting to kind of sort of like turn around or whatever. I'm having a conversation with my mom one day because we started actually talking again, because I didn't talk to her for probably almost 2 years after I left, almost 3. And it was almost one of those, I only called her when I needed something, And so we're having a conversation. I have siblings that are quite a bit younger than me. And she was like, I was having a conversation and with your brother's, friend's mom, and she didn't know I had an older child. And so I was like, yeah, my daughter, she's like 25, like she's doing great. I'm super proud. I was like, oh, you're proud? Like, well, okay. Little does she know. And then she's like, yeah, she made a comment about how I had never been arrested.
No.
And I was like, well, I have something to tell you. And she's like, what?
Oh, no.
And like, she starts to try to like parent me. And I was like, look, I don't need you to give me a guilt trip. Trust me, because I've beat myself up over this like well enough. And that was almost like this pivotal turning point in our relationship of like, oh, like she's becoming an adult.
Matured.
Exactly. So from that point on, it like totally shifted what was important to me. I stopped drinking. I stopped, partying as much. And I really got into fitness. Like, when you have an addictive personality, you have to find it in something else, and entered fitness. So I could get that adrenaline rush. I could get all of the things that like most druggies or addicts, I guess you could call it, are seeking. And that's where I just fell in love with fitness again, specifically kettlebells.
Okay.
Because it is such a mind, like you have to use your mind to do it. Most workouts, you can mindlessly go through your workout. You're not really thinking of the mind to body connection and things like that. But kettlebells, you have to, because you could seriously injure yourself. But even the art of kettlebells, it's not a workout equipment. It's actually a tool. And if you understand the history of kettlebells and where it comes from and why they used it and things like that and what you can do for your body with it, I just dove right into it, and it just became an obsession. And then, left San Diego, opened a kettlebell gym, and then the rest has kind of been history the last 10 years or so.
Damn, Courtney, thank you, first of all, for being vulnerable and sharing your story, because I know there's a lot of people out there that might have gone through something similar, right? And they are looking for the hope. You're looking, how can I overcome these challenges that you did? Yeah. How do I replace maybe some of the addictions that I had, right? And kind of the theme that what I hear you saying, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's kind of like life's happening for you, not to you, right?
Totally. Yeah. And I think like when bad things happen in our lives, like we want to find someone or something to blame.
The victim mindset.
Exactly. And I think in the beginning, I had that mindset. And I think a lot of that, the reason why I don't have that now, and I can look at it at a different perspective, is because I did become really close with God and understood like, look, like my path was created before I was even born.
Right.
And I was trying to direct my path. And when you're trying to control things, nothing is going to work. I don't care how hard you work at something and I'm going to do this and this and this and this and this. But you will always find roadblocks that way. And when you go, all right, I give up. I'm going to let you tell me what to do and how to do it. And then things start to fall into place. And that's literally what I have felt like majorly in the last 2 years, because after losing the gym, it was kind of like, oh, why? What did I do wrong? Yeah. You know what I'm saying? You 100%. Want to blame somebody. But then I realized, like, well, first off, I'm not the one that shut the world down. I'm not the one that did all of these things. But I became really close with God in the last 2 years. And I see the opportunities now that were probably placed in front of me in my early 20s. And I was just like, whatever. That doesn't align with what I want it to be. You know what I'm saying?
100%.
So yeah, like I feel like things don't happen to you, but they happen because of the choices that you might be making inadvertently, not thinking about it. Like subconsciously, we do things day to day that we don't really think about what are the consequences of, or where is this going to lead my path?
Yeah.
So again, I think it's also who you surround yourself with.
That's
like
right.
I said, right? Like if that's, you want to change your life, you have to change who you're hanging out with and who you're talking to and the content that you consume and all of these other different things. Like you can't expect to be great and do it on your own.
Mm-hmm. Gosh, man, so much nuggets in what Courtney's like, so much wisdom in what she's dropping, guys. Like, you guys need to go back and listen to some of that if you missed it, because there's a lot of wisdom and nuggets in that.
Hey guys, one question that Mike and I get asked all the time is, how do I go from where I'm at now to making $10,000 to $30,000 a month in remote closing? And Mike and I are big believers in coaching in general. We spent thousands upon thousands of dollars to get to where we're at now. So what we've done is we've just released one-on-one coaching for those of you watching this that want to break into the space and start making big commission checks now. One-on-one help, one-on-one guidance to show you exactly what to do, what not to do, when to do it to get you the results that you want. If you're watching this and you want to apply for coaching with us, now every month we're going to accept 5 coaching students into the program that want to get to that $10,000 to $30,000 a month mark. If that's you, all you got to do is go to bit.ly/Closers Network Coaching, or you can click the link in the description below. Back to the podcast.
And also it's like, I think you had the mentality of what Bedros, I think, preaches about is like control what you can, cope with what you can, and then concentrate on what counts, right?
Yeah.
So that's beautiful. I would love to know if, you're an amazing closer. So with that being said, I would imagine there's probably times where, maybe there is some rejection you deal with, or periods where sales are a little bit slower, right?
Yeah.
How do you stay motivated in times like that?
That I think is really hard. And I'm just going to be brutally honest, right? Like I've had a lot going on. Like I have a very difficult child. We deal with a lot of stuff with him, and when your mindset isn't right, I think it affects everything, right? And it obviously affects work when you're in a position where you need to give yourself mentally fully, right? And I did definitely struggle that in the last year. My paychecks definitely made a big impact off of that. Mm-hmm. So I can't sit here and say like, hey, I'm so great at dealing with this, because I'm not, I just want to be honest. But I think it's when you're dealing with those areas, like having to, or being able to talk to others who can uplift you when you can't uplift yourself.
That's right.
So, I definitely wanted to blame, the slow leads, or these aren't qualified, and then catching myself wait, you're doing exactly what you did in your 20s. You're trying to find an excuse for everything. Your excuse is yourself. Jeez. And your own mindset.
Jeez.
And it took me literally 9 months to finally be like, Courtney, wake up. What are you doing? And so specifically, and even in just the last couple of weeks, I kind of had to give myself that reality check that, look, if you want to continue providing the way that you have been providing for the last year and being able to do the things, then you need to change yourself. So I started doing more coaching sessions with Trish. I started doing more, group sessions with the girls on the team, where we would role play with each other, and we would, do objection handling. And I think just re-engaging myself like back in the community because I had pulled back so much. I wasn't engaging in the Slack channel. I wasn't talking with anybody. I was on that island. And when you're on that island, like it will sink you 100%. And I think just coming into the new year still was struggling between January, end of February. I was super sick in February, so I like only worked like 7 days. But coming into March, like even though it's only a few days into the month, I'm like, man, I feel like I did in that very first couple of months working for 1cc and selling. Like I feel like, all right, I'm back into it mindset wise. So I can deal with the rejections a lot better. It's not going to tear me down. Like one call, one person saying no, I'm not going to take it into the next call.
Yeah.
And then being able to go back and like review things.
Right.
And being humbled by like, hey, I'm not the best, I might be good and I might have great, opportunities, but there's always room for improvement. If that answered your question.
1000%. I appreciate you sharing that because I recently had a conversation with a very dear and loved closer who I heard you say I had to wake up almost, right? Those were the words you used. I wrote down, wake up. And I had to have this conversation with this closer. I was like, dude, the problem is you've just switched the on shift to off. So I was like, you need to switch it back on, get back into closing mode, right? Put the closing hat on. But what I heard you say, for those of you guys that didn't really pay attention to what Courtney just said, she said the reason she bounced back was her environment, the coaching she receives, the sets and reps that she actually put in, the feedback that she got, but also being proactive with getting that feedback, getting that help, guys. There's so much to unpack there, but man, that's really powerful, Courtney. That's really powerful.
I think like one of the biggest things too, when you feel like you're in a slump is like, especially when you're working in a very large team like ours, right? I think on my account, there's like 120, 130 people.
Yeah, it's crazy. Growing all the time.
It's growing all the time. And it's so hard to not compare yourself to others, right? So then you start watching other people's calls and you're like, oh, well, that's working for them. Let me pull that in. And you totally get away from who you are. You have to be your authentic self. You cannot pretend to be somebody else when it comes to sales.
That's right.
Because then you feel like a fraud,
That's right. Imposter syndrome kicks in.
Exactly. Oh, 100%, and it's like, when, so I have ADD and like that's something and I just struggle with in general is imposter syndrome. It's just, you talk to anybody that has it. That's just how our brain is wired. And so when you start to kind of go down that path, it becomes a very dark path where you're like, what is wrong with me? Why am I not? So one of the biggest things, Trish, who you've also done a podcast with, love her to death. She's an amazing closer, is that she challenged me and she goes, Courtney, stop watching other people's calls. Go and watch your own calls. Watch your own sales.
It's uncomfortable.
It's super
very uncomfortable to watch your own call. I don't like doing it ever.
I don't like listening to myself.
Yeah,
I hate none of it. It's horrible, right? But then she goes, don't even just watch your sales that you didn't close because those aren't going to teach you anything really more because you know what your framework is.
Right.
You know what you should be doing.
Right.
Like when I first started and, I'm saying this in a humbly mode, but like I was a 60 to 70% close rate, which is why I can work 3 days a week.
Right.
Geez,
60 to 70% close rate, guys. For those of you guys who don't know the industry, like 25, 30, 35% at best is kind of average, right?
Yeah.
Across the board. That is insanity right there.
Yeah. And so it was like, go back and watch the sales that you crushed so that you can get back into that like hype up mode. You have to be your own hype person.
That's
you know
right.
what I'm saying? Like nobody's going to hype you up like you can hype up yourself. So I did. I went back and I started watching like my $17,000 packages, my $10,000 packages.
Jeez.
I mean, and then I had to remind myself like, look, Courtney, like you were the first person to sell 10K packages on this team. You were the first person to sell 17K packages on this team. You sold 4 10K packages in one day.
Gangster.
And then a 17K the next day. So I have to remind myself of like what I have done and not focused on like, dude, you can't even sell a $2,000 package right now. What's wrong with you?
That's
and like trying to pick it apart. And there's nothing wrong with me. It's this.
Yes.
You have to have your mind correct when you are in a sales position because you're going to hear no's.
That's right.
And you cannot take those no's personally.
That's right.
And when you start to take them personal, that's when you start to try to, well, how do I fix things? Well, it's not necessarily that you have to fix things. You need to listen better.
That's right.
And when you do the same kind of sale over and over and over, you know what you're going to hear. You know what to expect. So then you start predicting it and you're not listening any longer.
That's right.
And when it comes to sales, you have to be a really good listener.
Damn. Jeez. That's powerful stuff, guys. That's really powerful stuff. I want to get into, I would imagine running a gym's like a hefty gig where it takes a lot of time, right? A lot of effort.
Yeah.
You got payroll, you got expenses, right? the bills are due, this is happening, that's happening. How does it feel to work a lot less?
Oh my gosh.
Only 3 days a week. I would imagine you're working a lot less.
Yeah.
And being able to make 5 times the income that you were making in this space versus actually owning a business.
Yeah. And that's what's crazy, right? Is like, I still get to be an entrepreneur, but I don't have all like the overhead, like stress behind it. So,
that's right.
You know, running the gym, I had like 10 employees. I had well over 100 clients. Like it was a lot. It was 6 days a week, 12, 16, 18-hour days, just depending on what we were doing at that time or if I was traveling and things like that. And so being able to take a step back and still be my own boss, because obviously I have to be, but doing it in a confined way where there's structure, because I need structure that somebody else gave me. I think that's also the thing. As an entrepreneur, like you don't have structure. You have to be very good at it yourself. And if you're not good at it, which I'm not good at, and I know that about myself, like I'm like fly by the seat of my pants type of person. Coming into an atmosphere like high ticket sales, where it gave me the opportunity to still be my own boss, have kind of a structure, because you have to have a structure, right? But given the opportunity to be able to take the aspects of myself that I know I'm really, really, really good at and implement it in a way where it's less stressful, if that makes sense.
Yes.
I feel like I can be a better mom, a better wife, a better sister, a better daughter, because I'm not so stressed out about, okay, well, we've got to get 10 more clients. I've now got this overhead. Now we've got taxes. Now we've got, all of these different things. And I mean, you still deal with that, like, because you're still like, a business owner when you're doing high ticket sales, but there's not all of the bits and pieces like a brick and mortar would have to be.
Absolutely.
And so I don't know if I'm answering your question right, but it's definitely given me the ability to, work very small hours of chunks. And that's the great thing, right? You make your own schedule.
That's right.
So you can work as much or as little as you want. And my philosophy is like, when I'm looking at numbers, because I'm a numbers person, and I understand close percentages. And that to me tells me how much of a better closer you are. I don't care if you sold $200,000, but if your close rate is only 30%, like, yes, that's the industry average. But what if your close rate was 60%?
That's right.
And you still took that same amount of calls? Dude.
Right.
Your numbers would be through the roof if that's what drives you, right?
Exactly.
I'm not, and this is what's really weird, I'm not one that's driven by money anymore. I used to be. Money used to rule my life, especially when I was in my 20s and in my early 30s. So now I go through the mindset of, yes, I told you very lofty goals of $200,000 working 3 days a week. And I can do it.
Yeah.
But I think it's the reality of like, what can I do with that? Or who can I service with that money? It's not just going to come to me. Can I, give money to family? Like, can I give it to church? Can I set something up for my kid so that he can be super successful when he turns 18? I'm not about handing things away, but I think it's also about like helping people who may not be where you are and they didn't have the opportunities that I've had. And so my love language is giving. Ask anybody around me, like gifts of service or not service specifically, but just gifts.
Yeah.
Like my siblings are always like, you just give. Like that's me. I have a tattoo of a willow tree that I got in my early 20s. My great aunt sent me this website long time ago that was like, you put your birthday in and it gave you all these like different crazy things about yourself. And like my tree is a willow tree and willow trees are indestructible. Everything inhabits them. They're always giving to everybody around them and they never expect anything back.
Interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah. And I was like, wow, like that's so true. That's so me. And so now in this mindset that I'm at now, in this abundance mindset of like, hey, I want these things. I'm going to work for these things so that I can give it back to others in other ways, whether that's,
amazing.
Community or whatever that is. So that's why I have these lofty goals, not because I want to live a lavish lifestyle or anything like that. It's more or less about just being able to, one, provide what I couldn't have as a kid.
Right.
I never want to have to tell my son, sorry, we can't afford to do that. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of us hear that as kids.
Yeah. I certainly did.
Yeah. And so like, that's what drives me, is being able to provide a better life than what myself and my husband had to ourselves.
It's amazing. Yeah. That's incredible, man. What a story. Even me growing up, like I would always see my grandparents and parents and like, dude, we do like reuse trash bags. We'd have like, you know, they'd have like the coupons. They'd have to go on this day and this hour and buy everything. And I'd see the trash. Like, I never want to live this life when I grow up, man. I don't want to, this is the last thing that I'm going to do. So I'm very highly money motivated, I think, for that reason. But it's like, yeah, I just saw that and I was like, I just don't want to have that life. I want to provide a better life, right, for my future family. But,
yeah.
We talked a little bit about money. I'd love to know what's been Courtney's biggest month in high ticket sales.
The biggest month that I had was in the beginning. I think I sold, what was it, 160,000 in the month, working 3 days a week. And this isn't like 3 days a week, 8-hour days either. This is 3 days a week, 4 hours.
Holy smokes.
I only work while my son's at school.
Jeez, 4 hours a day, 3 days a week. That's 12 hours.
Yeah. So, and it's mind-boggling, right?
160,000 in cash collected. What does that convert to in commissions earned?
At that time, I think commission was 17%. So what does that equate out to? I'm really bad at numbers. I had my calculator.
Dude, I don't have my phone on me either.
I think commission that month with bonuses and everything that was add on it, I think it ended up being like 24,000, 25,000. And I sat there, right? I mean,
4 hours, 3 days a week, guys.
I know. Well, and what's even crazier about it, right, is like, I sat there in this realization of like, holy crap, this is what some people make in a year.
Yeah.
You know, and even if it's a slow month and I'm only making like $4,000, like that's nothing. In high ticket sales, it's nothing, right? But then I still have to remind myself, like, there's people who are only making $1,200 a month.
Exactly.
You know, so I can sit and like, yes, you always want to make that high dollar amount and you always want to strive for that. But it's like being grateful for what you are, because obviously if you're not putting the work in, then you're not going to make any money. And I can sit and say, like, during those slow times, I wasn't putting the work in, you know, and you have to put the work in.
There you go.
So yeah, my goal is to get back to, you know, having those kinds of months again.
Put the work in.
Yeah. And so we're projected that way this month. So I'm excited for that.
Jeez. Let's dive into, I got a couple more questions for you. I wanted to get into the house, and you already brought that up, and going on multiple vacations you shared, right? And some of the things that you were able to do. It's been incredible just over the last year and just a year after filing bankruptcy.
Yeah.
And you kind of shared, you know, how that felt and what that journey was like. What advice would you give someone who's considering maybe a similar career change and looking to transition into this high ticket space?
Do it.
Don't
think about it. Because I think our natural thing is when we're uncomfortable is to not do it, right? You can always learn. Mm-hmm. You know, you don't have to have sales experience. Some of the best people on our team have never had a sales experience, right? If your goal is to get out of the everyday grind, the 9 to 5, where you feel stuck, you don't feel fulfilled, you're literally living paycheck to paycheck, and you have the opportunity to come to even us, you know what I'm saying? Like, go to the Closer Network and see everything that's provided, right? There's so much content in there that you can learn and grow. And then come on over to 1CZ, you know, like it's just this great opportunity, you know, do it, grab the bulls by the horn, go for it. You know, if you're faithful, pray about it. Because I think that if you do things on your own will and it's not the right time, then things don't feel right as you're doing it. But when an opportunity is handed to you, it's handed to you for a reason. It's not by coincidence. So take it and do the best that you can with it, and then strive to be better and better and better.
100%.
Okay.
I don't know if there's a better way to end the podcast than on that note, guys. And if you don't know or are not familiar with the Closers Network, guys, we're on a platform that's called School. That's SKOOL. It's actually going to be the second link below the description. You can join for completely free. You don't have to pay a dime, guys. We do Monday through Friday live coaching calls. We give you free courses that people tell us all the time are worth $15,000, $20,000 in content and value. Not even talking about the live training and coaching calls. You can come on and ask us anything. We're going to help you out with whatever it is. And if you're interested to take it a step further, right, and you want to work one-on-one with us, you have the opportunity to coach with the Closers Network coaches, whether it's myself or Coach Trish, and we can either help you land a 6-figure remote gig, or we can help you increase your commissions massively if you're already on an offer. So click that link, the first link below, if you want to schedule a one-on-one call to chat with me about what the one-on-one coaching is like. And I want to just thank our guest today, Courtney, for making the time. She flew out here from Seattle to make this happen and come out and support us for the event. So really appreciate you, Courtney. Thank you so much for everything that you're doing. Do you have any final thoughts you want to leave our listener with?
If you're looking for a change, do it. You know, like you said, like the opportunity to have access to high thinking people in this industry. Again, it comes back to you got to surround yourself by these people. So take advantage of it, because look, there's nobody else in this industry, in this market, who is doing what you guys are doing when it comes to providing free content. And that just tells you a lot about you guys in general, like who you are as people, who you are in your core of who your being is, right? Is you want to help other people strive and be better. And by providing an opportunity that gives somebody, hey, let me see if this is good for me, right? You can log on to these calls and you can hear from, other high performing closers, and you can hear what they're struggling with and how do they solve that, and that's the great thing about the interaction part of what we do, in school, right? Is, hey, here's a scenario. How would you deal with it? So you can learn all of these things. And then when you get onto like a high ticket, team, you feel more comfortable and confident kind of going into it. So 100% hands down, can't recommend it enough. Go right now. Click the link.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
Awesome. Guys, we'll see you on the next episode. Courtney, thank you so much for coming out.
Thanks,
really
Mike.
appreciate you. It's been awesome.
Yeah.